Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Life with me, Raza Ghazim. The Femen activist group often bears all to get the attention they want to highlight their cause. In one of these attention-seeking events, our guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan, was targeted and has first-hand experience of bearing the brunt of these tactics. So why do these women adopt these colonial narratives of trying to save the women of the barbarian or of the other? While the sense of being anti-establishment is part of their makeup, why are they propagating the establishment agenda?
Muslim women were turned off by Femen and protested loudly on the social media, saying that the activists' motivations and methods reeked of a pervading and deep-rooted ignorance of Islam itself. Muslim women do not need saving by feminists like Femen, for they have nothing to offer to the Muslim world. While there are genuine concerns about women's rights in many Muslim countries, these mostly spring from backward cultural practices rather than Islam. Furthermore, there are many well-qualified and effective Muslim women who can speak for themselves and for their kindred, because they not only have the knowledge and understanding of the plight of these women, unlike the Western feminists like Femen, but they also know and understand that Islam itself liberates women and not vice versa.
We're honored to be joined by our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan, to discuss all of these issues. Welcome to the program, Professor.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I want to start off by asking, what does the Femen group stand for? What is their inspiration?
Yes, I think it's the right question to put, distinguishing two things. What they say and what is the reality of what they are doing. So what they are saying is it's a group which was thought a few years ago, and the very essence of the group is to defend women's rights, where around the world, even in the West and in the Muslim majority countries. Mainly focusing on the Muslim majority countries and what is happening with Islam today. On the other side, if you look at their history, the guy who was behind the whole project, the woman who was with him and founded the whole thing, there are levels and ideologies that have nothing to do with this struggle. Mainly a pro-Zionist group connected to some, secular trends, having an ideology by using Islam because this is the story of the time, this is what we are facing today, and targeting this and promoting a narrative about the liberation of women's liberation, which is, we have to get rid of religion and Islam first and foremost in order to get this liberation. So we have to get it right. The ideology behind it's much more connected to other interests than only women.
So in terms of when they came to your talk, why do they target you? Because are you against women's rights?
This is what, it was a meeting where we were talking about political Islam. So once again, if you look at what happened everywhere in the Muslim majority countries, what they are saying, they are against Islamists. Political Islam is one of the targets. Why? Because political Islam is against women's rights. This is what they are saying, and in fact it's mainly against the secular ideology. So they are promoting all this at the same time, and so they came in a discussion that we had, during which discussion I was quite critical about what happened, for example, in Egypt, and I was critical, and they came and it was just not talking about the substance but making the headlines. So in fact on this, they were very successful on just getting the headlines. On the substance of what they are saying, at the end, they are not saying anything. And this is why straight away, when I was asked just to sue them and to say, this is an event, there is nothing, they did nothing, and they are nothing.
So in terms of their idea of trying to save Muslim women, and what are they trying to do, and who are they trying to save them from?
In fact, there are many levels. The first level is religions, by definition, are against women's rights. So very often it's an anti-religious discourse. So this is one. Within this, what they are saying, they are saying this to cover the fact that mainly they are targeting Muslims almost all the time, and especially in the West and in Muslim majority countries. A woman, a Tunisian woman, was a member of the group, and she left by saying, I'm not going to promote Islamophobia, because what she experienced from within, it was very Islamophobic statements that they had from within. So she left. She was put in jail in Tunisia. She got out of jail, and then she said, I don't want to be involved anymore with Femen. So what they are saying is that...
And she had been inspired because she felt that they were standing up for women's rights. That's presumably why.
Exactly, at the beginning. But the woman, before even entering into the group, was a bit controversial and having some, and even now she left them, but she still have ideas about, you know, my body, it's my body belongs to me, so I can do whatever I want with it. So very much against the Islamic reference, but not willing to play within the ideology of Femen. So she left this. What we have when it comes to Femen, and this is why it's very important and it's very vicious, in fact, is to try to take right causes and right questions into something which is an ideology, which does not present itself as it is. So it's to take exactly the controversial issues and to make, you know, a big fuss about what is happening and not touching the essence of the problem. And it's as if, and many women, I mean, many Muslim women, not only Muslim women, by the way, many Western women don't think that this is the right way of doing things. They don't acknowledge the credibility of their struggle for women's rights. And I think that, once again, for us, what is important is to be clear about the way they are using media and controversies and shocking the people. That has nothing to do with what we need to do. While at the same time, there are questions that we need to take, as the clip was saying, there are questions that we need to address when it comes to women's rights within the Muslim majority countries.
One of the things that they do is that they're seen to be anti-establishment because of perhaps the shock tactics that they're actually using. In terms of their makeup, but yet they're also promoting the establishment agenda.
Exactly.
So how does that add up? How do you...
You know, the power of the establishment is to launch some groups that are claiming that they are against the establishment, but they are doing exactly what the establishment wants. And we have this on so many issues and so many ways. When it comes to racism, sometimes you have the government pushing for anti-racist groups, but in fact they are manipulating them, and it's exactly the same. So come with something which is against the establishment, but at the end, what they are promoting and what the media are covering, and very often in this situation, for example, the anti-establishment got the coverage of all the established newspapers around the world. So look what they are doing. So there is a game here that we need very much from within, and this is why I'm asking the citizens, Muslims of people of other faith or with no faith, that we have to be very cautious with instrumentalizing real causes for very dirty politics, and to ask who is supporting you, from where do you get this money, how are you going to work, and how are you dealing with the whole issue. And this is where, when you go to study a little bit, you see, look, it has nothing to do with the right struggle and a sincere struggle for women's rights.
We're focused on Femen. Are they the only group that perhaps is using the establishment agenda, or are there other women's groups that might also fall in this category?
As I told you, there are groups that are promoting racism, for example, an anti-racism approach. And once again, you can see the connection with establishment, with political power. When it comes, for example, on the discussion with religion and Islam in the West, look at what is happening in the US with Trump and all this. So there is here, there are groups coming and talking about, for example, secularism, and behind secularism there is clearly an Islamophobic agenda.
And when you talk about secularism, they're coming from a secular perspective, and how are they using the secular agenda?
So sometimes, yes, they have a secular agenda. For some, in fact, they are using secularism in a way which is not secularist to help our societies in the West to have a diversity of religions, but to be against religion. So it could be atheistic, It could be a way of rejecting religions, or it could be, and this is why it's sometimes important, why I was saying that you have to see the connection between Zionism and some of these groups, using secular to target Muslims and citizens in order for them to have a problem within and not to be heard as to the political discourse internationally and domestically. So I think that, once again, we have to get this right. It's complex and there are networks, so it's not a conspiracy theory, but it's just to look at the problem and to try to understand who is playing with what.
And within that context of women's rights and so on, are there genuine Western women's rights that are being addressed by Femen, or is that not happening?
Yes, it happens, and I think that this is, for example, when it comes to job market, job opportunities, equal salaries. Yes, they are. So this is what I'm saying. In fact, it's vicious because they are using right questions for a not so noble cause in the way they are playing with it. But what we have to do, and this is why I don't care about their methods, I don't care about their shocking things. The only thing that matters for me, and I think for us, should be what are the right questions they are putting that we need to deal with in a very substantial and in-depth way.
That's really useful. We'll come back to some of these points. We do like to keep the show as interactive as possible. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, do Muslim women need feminists' help? Zara from Australia said, feminists are not capable of doing anything for Muslim women, because they don't just not understand Islam, but they actually misunderstand it. Muslim women do not want the type of demoralized freedom that Western feminists advocate. Karima from Pakistan said, there are many serious issues Muslim women face, but these can only be addressed by Muslim women themselves. We do have Muslim feminists who understand the context of the assistance needed and also the approach, and they are best placed to address these challenges. And John from Finland said, feminists just don't get it. They are going about the whole matter of wanting to impose their culture on other people. Muslim women can do with support, but this support has to be in line with Islamic morals and culture.
This is nothing to do with feminists. This is just human rights. Okay, as you know, as a community, as a civilization, we should all help one another. You know, if I needed help, I could ask my friends, Muslim and non-Muslims. Okay, so I don't believe that this is something specifically to do with feminism. Okay, obviously, I respect what feminists are out there to do. They're there to help women have more equality and have the, you know, same, I guess, level. But the way I see it is, women and men, we have different roles in society. Okay, men have certain traits that women can't have, and vice versa. But as long as we are strong within ourselves and we know that we're not oppressed and we're doing what we do for our own, well, we do what we think is right. Okay, and you know, we follow our religion and we follow the sunnah within Islam. I don't think there's a problem here, and I don't think we need Western women telling us how to live our lives.
What I would say is that it's a lack of knowledge. At the end of the day, it's down to your limited amount of knowledge you have about Islam. If you were to see Islam from the correct perspective, sat by, I don't say look into the books. You can look into the books, but sit with the books and the scholars. They will explain to you how women have been given such a great status, that they've been classified as not only institutions, learning institutes for us, but for many generations to come.
That's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your views featured in the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter. Now you can send your own videos with your comments and even your questions to islamandlife@presstv.com.
One of the things that people actually talked about is this idea that groups like Femen have completely missed the point of trying to have any kind of understanding of what the issues are that Muslim women face, and so therefore they become completely redundant in the Muslim women's struggle to get justice within their societies. How can that be addressed?
To start with, I wouldn't put Femen at the level of the feminist struggle. I think it's too much to give them on this. I think that they don't have the credibility of that. These are groups that are secondary and not really serious and not having no credential. What we are talking about in the clip and what you are asking is about feminists, and we have to differentiate between feminism and feminism. There is one tradition that is coming from the West and very rooted in the Western tradition, and people are dealing with issues that are that have to do with the Western history. Some of the struggles are common to what we see in Muslim majority countries, and some others are completely specific to the West. So we have to be very cautious not to take one model and to export the model into the Muslim majority countries. And some other feminists are quite aware. They were even targeting not only the struggle of women against men, but the ideology that is coming from the West. So it's what we call intersectionality, by saying there are many different levels. So for example, black American women were saying, not only we are dealing with men, but we are also dealing with the Western ideology, and plus the upper class ideology within the society. So it's a question of class, it's a question of Western ideology, it's a question of racism, and then it's a question of men and women. So they were saying, there are many dimensions. So from where we are, we could say, yes, we agree with this. We cannot just look at it, it's men versus women, or women struggling against men's power, for example. It's deeper than that. And to do this, within an Islamic context, within the Muslim majority countries, you need to be knowledgeable about Islam, to understand in history how there was an emancipation in the name of Islam from the traditional cultures, the patriarchal culture, and now to come and to see how some, for example, in Saudi Arabia, when a woman cannot drive, so for example, how some are using the cultural oppression and instrumentalizing religion in this case. So if you want to do this, you need to know the Islamic reference, the cultures of origin in the specific countries, the relationship between this culture and the dominant Western culture and global culture today, and all this has to be put together. So I think it's right what the woman was saying in the clip. It's only going to come from within. I would say yes and no. It comes from within, but we also have other trends and women that could help within this struggle.
So within that issues of intersectionality, where Muslim women need help with the patriarchal attitudes or sexist attitudes, misogynism within Muslim societies, who do they turn to?
I think that this is where we should get it right. Feminism in this very meaning, when we are talking about this, and some they don't want to use feminism because it's loaded as a Western concept. They are saying just struggling for women's rights. I don't have a problem with both, but when we start discussing this issue, what is important is to understand that if we are talking about feminism in the name of Islam within the Muslim majority countries, is not women against men. It's men and women together. It's a common struggle. In fact, a common struggle in the name of the scriptural sources against the cultural and social and historical distortions. This is what we are talking about. So we have to come together. So in which way? I don't have a problem being perceived as a Muslim feminist if it's clearly understood that I'm referring to the text, faithful to the text, but critical towards what the societies are doing. And what we have to do is to work at three different levels. The first one is our relationship to the scriptural sources, the texts. How do you read them? You always read them from a very specific cultural environment. So of course, if you are in a patriarchal society, the way you look at the issue is going to be, there could be a cultural projection. So we have to deal with this. The second is literalism, that we have people taking one verse and literally not putting it in a context, not understanding it within the global message. So we have to deal with that. And the third is to understand the dynamics within the society, how step by step you can emancipate, empower women within a specific social and cultural environment. So these are elements that are very important, and from this you add what we were talking about, the different dimensions of this power relationship, because at the end when you have it in the Quran, وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ, we created a couple from everything. There is always a power relationship, always. So how are you going to deal with this? Not to deny the fact that there is a power relationship, and how do we empower women within the Islamic tradition.
But one of the criticisms that could be leveled from the Western perspective about dealing with this is the fact that by putting the two together, and you're acknowledging that there is a power relationship, that in itself is not actually going to create the space for the women, for the Muslim women, to actually be able to express and have the kind of freedom that they actually want.
It's a fair argument. It could happen, yes. It could happen that if you have men, at the end of the day, you are dealing with it as if you are denying that it could be a power relationship. Now, the problem with us, or at least the solution for that, would be to say, yes, but there is something which is for us a reference, al-masdar, al-asli, which is the text, the revelation. So if you are dealing within a specific tradition, both men and women are at least acknowledging the fact that this is the reference. Now we may disagree on the way we are reading the scriptural sources. If you are a man and you read the scriptural sources and you are dealing about women's issues, very often we are looking at the roles of women within the society. A woman would read the Quran by thinking about the essence of her being. So the starting point might be different, but it's not only through this struggle that you can be empowered. It's also through a discussion and through people who are also understanding, men or women, understanding the objectives of the struggle. So you have a common source and you have a common objective. Now you can work together. But it's true that sometimes it's not going to be as easy as that, because there is a power relationship that you have to take into account.
And Muslim women's role within society in the West, the issues of intersectionality come into it. Is there a hierarchy of oppression, dare I say, that they have to face as a result of this, that perhaps feminists are going to be saying, hang on, this is the bigger problem, and not, if you like, the oppression of the Western society against the other, as it were?
Yes and no. I would say what we face now, and this is something which is a superficial way of dealing with feminism, is to say, you know what, your visibility is the problem, is the way you wear the khimar, the headscarf, is the way you dress. Symbols that are not tackling the real dynamic. For us, what is important, even in the Western society, is what we are seeing now, that the problem is that in many societies or traditional societies, what it was the involvement into education. What we have now in the West for the great majority of the Muslim women is that they are even much more educated than men. So they have this. The intersectionality is going to be at the job opportunity, the job market, and the salaries. These are something which is, and then add to this something which is essential, because we keep on as Muslims saying, you know what, family is essential for us. Family is the center of everything. That's fine. But when you come to deal with it in the way we are talking about marriage, the way we are talking about divorce, the way we are talking about financial autonomy, these are all dimensions that we have to take into account in the intersectionality, dealing with the surrounding society and dealing within a concept, a philosophical conception of family, or an Islamic conception of family. So I think that this is where the deep problems arise, and this is what we have to tackle. This is not what we are doing. We are at the periphery of answering what the dominant West is asking us about the veil, about the way you dress, about violence and domestic violence. That's all good and right. We should say, as a Muslim, there is no domestic violence. It's prohibited from an Islamic perspective. But that's not enough. This is only the starting points of our struggle for more justice and equality.
And in terms of that intersectionality, is there going to be any particular thing that we should, Muslim women should focus on in terms of trying to get a feminist aspect of their improvement of their lives?
Yeah, I would say the starting point, if we speak from an Islamic perspective, is just to be clear on what are your sources and what are your objectives. At the end, are you abiding by the dominant culture, or are you ready for an emancipation or emancipative process that is helping you to be faithful to your principles, clear as to your objectives and free within your society. That's it. That's the starting point. And this is to be faithful to tradition. It means, yes, I can be a Muslim and I can be free. And it's even the opposite. In the name of Islam, the only way forward is to be free.
Lots of interesting points. Thank you for that. As the discussion was developing, I was reminded of how Lord Cromer in the early 20th century was promoting women's rights in Egypt, while at home in the UK, he was against the suffragette movement in their quest to get a vote. This kind of hypocrisy has a long, indistinguished history in the West and demonstrate that often these kind of calls for freedom are controlled by the establishment to further their own agendas. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan for joining us, and I thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.